Welcome, restless souls, to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close. The candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carman's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carman's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. Mom was acting weird when she picked me up from soccer practice. She had this nervous energy, like she was keeping some huge secret, and she kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, the way she did when she was anxious about something big. "How was practice, Jess?" she asked. But there was something underneath her voice, excitement mixed with nerves, like she was barely containing herself. "Fine," I mumbled, sliding into the passenger seat. Coach Martin had been brutal today, making us run suicide drills until half the team was puking, but that seemed pretty insignificant compared to whatever was eating at Mom. I'm only 16. I shouldn't be so tuned into my parents' moods. But Mom's nervous energy was contagious. I knew that Mom and my stepdad Jim had been trying to have a baby together for years. Mom had me right out of high school, and when she married Jim 8 years ago, I could tell he really wanted to be a real family with us. The fertility treatments, the doctor visits, all those hushed conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. It had been a long, exhausting journey for them. But today felt different. Mom seemed like she was buzzing with barely contained energy, rather than the quiet desperation I'd gotten used to over the past few years. I'd wanted a little brother or sister for as long as I could remember. When I was little, I used to pray for one every night, promising God I'd share all my toys and never complain about babysitting. But as the years went by, and Mom's face got sadder after each doctor's appointment, I started feeling guilty for even wanting it. "Mia's having a sleepover Friday," I said, trying to change the subject. "Can I go?" "Of course, sweetie." Mom's voice was distracted as she navigated through downtown traffic. "Did you finish your history essay?" "Due tomorrow, so naturally I haven't started." I was aiming for humor, but it fell flat. Everything felt flat lately. The house felt too quiet when we got home. Jim was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a bunch of papers spread out in front of him. He looked up when we walked in, and I caught this look that passed between my mom and stepdad, the kind of meaningful glance that meant they'd been talking about something important. "How was practice, kiddo?" Jim asked, but his heart wasn't in it. "Epic. I scored twice and didn't fall on my face even once." I grabbed an apple from the counter. "I'm gonna go start that essay." But as I headed toward the stairs, I heard Jim clear his throat in that way that meant big news was coming. I froze on the third step. "Jess, come back for a minute," Mom said. "Jim and I have something to tell you." I turned around slowly, my stomach doing this weird flip. The last time they'd called a family meeting, it was to tell me about Jim's company downsizing and how we'd need to tighten our belts for a while. Before that, it was when Grandma got sick. They were both sitting at the table now, and Jim reached for Mom's hand like he was steadying himself. "Your mom and I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "about our family, about what we want." Oh God, were they getting divorced? My mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. I'd have to choose who to live with, split holidays, explain to everyone why my parents couldn't be in the same room anymore. Jim had been the only dad I'd really known. My biological father had taken off before I could even walk. We've decided to adopt," Mom said quickly, like she could see the panic on my face. I nearly choked on my apple. "Seriously? That's amazing!" For the first time in months, Mom's smile looked real. "We found him, Jess. A baby boy. His name is Elliot." "Wait, you already found him? Like this is happening? For real?" I was practically bouncing now, the essay completely forgotten. Jim laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in weeks. "It's happening fast. We got the call yesterday. He's 4 months old, and if everything goes through with the paperwork, we could bring him home next week." "Next week?" I sank into the chair across from them. "Oh my God, we're getting a baby. I'm getting a brother." The words felt surreal. After all these years of hoping and disappointment, it was actually happening. I was going to be a big sister, and Jim was finally going to get the baby he'd always wanted with Mom. "There's a lot we don't know about his background," Mom said, her social worker voice kicking in. "His birth parents aren't in the picture and the agency has limited information, but he's healthy and he needs a family." "He needs us," Jim added, and something in his voice made me look at him closely. There was this desperate kind of hope in his eyes, like he was afraid to believe it was real. "Can I see pictures?" I asked. Mom pulled out her phone and showed me a few photos from the adoption agency. The baby, Elliot, was beautiful. Chubby cheeks, a tuft of dark hair, and these incredible violet blue eyes that seemed to stare right through the camera. "His eyes," I breathed. "They're amazing." "The agency said he's very calm," Mom said. "A quiet observer, they called him." I stared at the photo, already imagining all the things we'd do together, teaching him to walk, reading him stories, protecting him from bullies at school. I'd always been jealous of my friends who had siblings, especially Mia with her twin brother who annoyed her constantly, but would literally fight anyone who looked at her wrong. "When do we meet him?" I asked. The first week with Elliot was like living a dream. I'd never been around a baby before. Not really, and everything about him fascinated me. The way his tiny fingers would curl around mine, how he smelled like powder and something indefinably sweet, the soft sounds he made while sleeping. I became completely obsessed. I rearranged my entire schedule around him, skipping lunch with friends to rush home and help with feeding time, doing homework in his nursery so I could watch him sleep. Maya thought I'd lost my mind. "Jess, you're literally posting baby pics every hour," she said during our FaceTime call Thursday night. "We get it, he's cute." "He's not just cute, he's perfect," I insisted, adjusting my laptop so she could see Elliot in his bouncy seat. "Look at those eyes." Maya squinted at the screen. "They're really blue, like weird blue." "Violet blue," I corrected. "The adoption lady said it's super rare." Maya was already distracted, probably texting Jake Morrison about something more interesting than my baby brother. "Are you coming to Connor's party Saturday?" "Can't. Family bonding time." I didn't mention that I'd rather spend Saturday night teaching Elliot to smile than watching Connor's older brother supply beer to a bunch of sophomores. "You're becoming one of those people," Maya warned. "Next you'll be talking about dirty diapers like they're fascinating." But she didn't understand. Having Elliot felt like the missing piece of our family had finally clicked into place. Mom and Jim were happier than I'd seen them in years. Jim would get home from work and immediately go to wherever Elliot was, just staring at him with this goofy grin. Mom hummed while she folded his tiny clothes, something she hadn't done since before all the fertility stuff started. Even the house felt different, warmer somehow, like it had been waiting for Elliot too. The first weird thing I noticed was that Elliot never seemed to blink. I know that sounds crazy, but I swear I could stare at him for minutes and those violet eyes would just watch. It was kind of mesmerizing, actually. Most babies had that unfocused, dreamy look. But Elliot seemed intensely aware of everything around him. He's so alert. I told Mom one afternoon while we were doing tummy time. Elliot was on his playmat, but instead of looking at the colorful toys hanging above him, he was staring directly at me. The pediatrician said some babies are just more observant, Mom replied. But I caught her watching him with a slight frown. As long as he's hitting his milestones. Then there was the way our golden retriever, Buddy, started acting around him. Buddy had been our family dog for 8 years, and he loved everyone, especially kids. When the neighbors brought their toddler over, Buddy would practically vibrate with excitement. But whenever Elliot was in the room, Buddy would whine and slink away, his tail tucked between his legs. Maybe he's jealous, Jim suggested when I brought it up at dinner. Dogs can get territorial about new babies. But it wasn't jealousy. I knew jealousy. Buddy had been jealous when Mom brought home that stray cat last year, following her around and giving the cat dirty looks. This was different. This was fear. The really strange thing was how Buddy would react to Elliot's nursery. If the door was open, Buddy would stand in the hallway and whine, refusing to go in. If the door was closed, he'd pace back and forth, occasionally letting out these low, anxious barks. It's probably just the new smells, Mom kept saying. All the baby stuff, the different detergent we're using for his clothes. I wanted to believe her. I wanted everything to be normal and perfect, because we'd waited so long for this. But late at night, when I'd hear Buddy whimpering in the hallway, I'd get this weird feeling in my stomach that I couldn't shake. Still, during those first weeks, I pushed the doubts away. Elliot was quiet and content, rarely fussing. He'd sleep through the night, eat well, and spend his awake time just observing. The pediatrician said he was thriving. "You're so lucky," my friend Sarah said when she came over to meet him. "My cousin's baby screams constantly. This one's like a little angel." Angel. That's what everyone called him. Our little angel. If only we'd known what was really watching us through those unblinking violet eyes. It was Tuesday night when I first heard them. I was cramming for my AP history test, because apparently learning about the Napoleonic Wars was more important than sleep, when this weird sound drifted from Elliot's room. At first, I thought it might be the baby monitor acting up again. The thing had been crackling with static lately, picking up random radio stations and what sounded like someone else's baby monitor. But this was different. It sounded like whispering, but not normal baby babbling. This was deliberate. It seemed to carry meaning. I saved my essay because losing 3 hours of work to investigate weird baby sounds would be peak Jess stupidity, and crept down the hall. The whispering got clearer as I got closer to his room, but it still didn't sound like anything I'd ever heard before. I pressed my ear to the door. Definitely Elliot's voice, but the sounds he was making were wrong. They weren't the cute little coos and gurgles that made Mom melt every time. These were clicks and guttural sounds, almost like he was speaking in some kind of code. My heart started beating faster. I eased the door open just a crack and peeked inside. Elliot was sitting up in his crib, which should have been impossible because he was only 4 months old and couldn't even roll over yet. The nightlight cast everything in this eerie blue glow, and his violet eyes were fixed on the dark corner of his room, the one where shadows seemed to gather even in daylight. His lips were moving constantly, making those strange clicking sounds. But here's the really freaky part. It almost sounded like he was having a conversation. He'd make a series of clicks, then pause like he was listening to something, then respond with more of those guttural noises. I fumbled for my phone, thinking I should record this for Mom and Jim, but the moment I moved, The sound stopped. Elliot's head snapped toward the door, toward me, and those unblinking eyes locked onto mine through the crack. I froze. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then his mouth curved into what might have been a smile, and he lay back down in his crib like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. OMG, did you see what happened at Jason's party? Check Insta now. I stumbled back to my room, my hands shaking slightly as I typed back. Can't talk right now, studying. Since when do you turn down gossip for homework? She had a point. I live for drama, especially drama that didn't involve me directly. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd just seen. Babies didn't sit up at 4 months. They definitely didn't have conversations with empty corners. I tried to focus on my textbook, but the words kept blurring together. Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812. Elliot was sitting up and speaking in tongues. The invasion failed due to the winter conditions. My baby brother might be possessed or something. Finally, I gave up and opened my laptop, intending to research normal baby development milestones. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe some babies were just early developers. But instead of the baby websites I'd intended to visit, my browser opened to a page about changeling folklore. I stared at the screen, confused. I definitely hadn't been researching that. My search history showed the last thing I'd looked up was Napoleon's retreat from Moscow. The page was all about creatures from various mythologies that replaced human children. Most of the stories were probably just old-fashioned ways of explaining birth defects or developmental delays, but some of the details made my stomach twist. Unblinking eyes, unusual speech patterns, the ability to mimic human voices perfectly, animals acting strangely around them. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering. Too much caffeine and stress, that's all. I was letting my imagination run wild because of one weird baby moment and some probably random internet glitch. But when I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m., I dreamed of clicking sounds and violet eyes that never closed. The voice incident happened 3 days later, and it changed everything. I was in the kitchen making my infamous after-school snack, peanut butter toast with way too much honey, when I heard Mom shriek with excitement from the living room. "Jim! Jim, come here right now!" Jim came thundering down the stairs, nearly tripping over Buddy, who was doing his usual anxious pacing routine. What's wrong?" Jim was already reaching for his keys, probably assuming we needed to rush to the hospital. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. Jess, come here." Mom's voice was so high-pitched with excitement that I thought she might hyperventilate. I found them both kneeling by Elliot's bouncy seat in the living room, practically vibrating with parental joy. Elliot was staring right at me with those violet eyes, and something about his expression made me stop short. "Say it again, sweetie." Mom cooed, her voice that special octave that all adults seem to use around babies. "Tell Jim what you told Mommy." Elliot's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, but it looked wrong somehow. "Jess," he said clearly. My blood went cold. Not because he had said my name. That would have been amazing. No, what freaked me out was how he said it. It sounded exactly like Mom's voice, just smaller. Like someone had taken a recording of Mom saying my name and played it through a tiny speaker. "That's great," I managed, backing toward the doorway. "Isn't it incredible?" Jim was practically bouncing. "His first word, and it's his big sister's name. Most babies say Mama or Dada first," Mom added, beaming at me. "But he chose you." Elliot kept staring at me, and I swear his smile got wider. Then he opened his mouth again. "Jess," he repeated, but this time It was in Jim's voice. Same tone, same inflection Jim used when he was calling me for dinner. My parents didn't seem to notice. They were too busy celebrating their genius baby who was clearly advanced for his age. But I noticed. I noticed the way Elliot's eyes never left my face, like he was studying my reaction. I noticed how perfect the mimicry was. Not just the words, but the exact vocal patterns of my parents. "I should record this for Grandma," Mom said, fumbling for her phone. "No!" The word came out sharper than I intended, making both my parents look at me in surprise. "Jess?" Jim frowned. "What's wrong? You look pale." I'm not feeling great. Might be getting sick." It wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach was churning, and I felt lightheaded. "Oh, honey, you should go rest. We don't want you getting Elliot sick." I nodded and escaped upstairs, but I could hear them cooing over Elliot for another 10 minutes. Every time he repeated my name in their voices, they'd dissolve into proud laughter. That night at dinner, Elliot performed his trick again. This time he said, "Mama," in Jim's voice, and "Dada," in Mom's voice. My parents thought it was hilarious, like he was just confused about who was who. "Babies' brains work differently," Jim explained, cutting up his chicken. "He's probably just mixing up the sounds he's learned." But I watched Elliot the whole time, and he never looked confused. If anything, he looked amused, like this was all some kind of game. After dinner, I cornered Mom in the kitchen while she was loading the dishwasher. "Don't you think it's weird?" I asked. "The way he's talking?" "Weird how?" Mom looked genuinely puzzled. "I think it's wonderful. He's obviously very intelligent." "But Mom, he sounds exactly like you and Jim. That's not how babies learn to talk." Mom paused, a plate halfway to the dishwasher. "Jess, honey, I know this is a big adjustment. Having a new baby in the house changes everything. And sometimes that can feel—" "I'm not jealous," I interrupted, though the accusation stung because part of me wondered if that's what this was. "I love Elliot. I just think something's off." Mom set down the plate and turned to face me fully. "Off how?" I struggled to find words that wouldn't make me sound crazy. "He doesn't blink, Mom, like ever. And Buddy's terrified of him. And the way he was sitting up the other night." "Sitting up?" Mom's eyebrows shot up. "Jess, he can't sit up yet. You must have seen something else." "I know what I saw." "Honey," Mom's voice took on that patient, slightly condescending tone she used when she thought I was being dramatic. "I know you've been stressed with school, and this is a big change for all of us. Maybe you should talk to someone." "I don't need therapy," I snapped. "I need you to actually look at your son instead of just seeing what you want to see." The words hung in the air between us. Mom's face went through several emotions: hurt, anger, disappointment. Finally, she settled on tired. "Go to your room, Jess. We'll talk about this when you've calmed down." I stomped upstairs, frustrated and angry and scared in equal measures. As I passed Elliot's room, I heard him making those soft cooing sounds that made my parents melt. But when I peeked through the crack in the door, he was sitting up again, staring directly at me. "Jess," he whispered in my own voice, "I'm not the one you should be worried about." I was cleaning Elliot's room, because apparently being the big sister means automatic babysitting duties, something I had dreamed about but now found myself resenting. When I found it, a small wooden box hidden under his mattress. It was freezing cold and covered in these intricate carvings. The moment I touched it, the room spun. A voice, ancient and raspy, whispered in my ear, "Put it back." I dropped the box like it was on fire. When I looked up, Elliot was standing in the doorway. Standing. He was barely 6 months old. "It's mine," he said in that flat, emotionless voice. "Don't touch it." I ran. I literally ran out of that room and didn't stop until I was in my car, driving nowhere, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I called Mia, but how do you explain that your baby brother is some kind of thing? That night, I did what any self-respecting teenager does when faced with the impossible. I went down a research rabbit hole. Ancient folklore, urban legends, creepypasta. I read it all. That's when I found them. The hollow ones. Creatures that fed on fear and despair. Shapeshifters that could mimic voices and manipulate reality. They were drawn to families dealing with loss, replacing children with vessels that opened doorways for their kind. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're learning. Good. They're coming soon." I stared at the message, my heart hammering. Then I heard it. Laughter from downstairs. But it wasn't Mom or Jim's laugh. It was mine. My exact laugh, echoing from Elliot's room. I found Mom and Jim in the kitchen the next morning, both looking exhausted. "We need to talk," I said, setting down my research printouts. Jim looked at the pages, screenshots of folklore sites, articles about unexplained phenomena. "Jess, what is this?" "The truth about Elliot." He's not human, Jim." I expected them to freak out, to tell me I was crazy. Instead, Mom sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. "I know," she whispered. "I've known for weeks, but I didn't want to believe it." That's when Jim told us about the book he'd found at the library. Old texts about creatures that preyed on grieving families. The hollow ones. "They're gathering," he said, his voice barely steady. "Tonight." The screaming started at 11:47 p.m. I was in my room, pretending to sleep while actually live streaming my fears to my phone notes app. Because if I died tonight, at least there'd be evidence. When Buddy's howls echoed through the house, not his normal barks. This was pure terror, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze. "Buddy?" I whispered, creeping toward my door. The howling cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I found Mom and Jim already in the hallway. We moved together toward the stairs, every creak of the floorboard sounding like thunder. The living room was dark, except for the faint blue glow from Elliot's baby monitor. In that eerie light, I could see Buddy lying near the couch. At first I thought he was just sleeping in a weird position. Then I saw his eyes. They were wide open, staring at nothing, filled with a terror so complete it made my stomach lurch. His beautiful golden fur was matted with something dark and sticky. That definitely wasn't mud. His body was wrong, twisted, like someone had grabbed him and just squeezed. "Oh my God," Mom whispered as she flicked on the living room light and illuminated our dead dog. That's when we heard the giggling. Elliot sat cross-legged on the floor, about 3 feet from Buddy's body, playing with something in his hands. As my eyes adjusted, I realized it was one of his wooden toys, except it looked exactly like Buddy. Golden fur, floppy ears, even the little white patch on its chest. "Bad dog," Elliot said in that flat, emotionless voice, making the wooden Buddy toy dance in his fingers. "He kept barking at my friends. They don't like noises." The toy's tiny wooden head was twisted at the same impossible angle as real Buddy's. "Elliot," Jim said slowly, like he was talking to a wild animal. "What did you do?" Elliot looked up at us with those violet eyes that seemed to glow. His smile was too wide and showing teeth that a baby his age shouldn't even have yet. "I showed him what happens when you're bad," he said, and his voice was mine again. My exact voice, my words, but coming from his mouth. Just like Jess showed me about being quiet. I felt sick. When had I ever said that to him? "The friends helped," Elliot continued, gesturing to the dark corners of the room. "They're very good at making things stop." That's when I noticed the shadows were moving. That's when they came. Tall, gaunt figures with glowing eyes, sliding out of the shadows like liquid darkness. The hollow ones. "We have to destroy that box in his bedroom," I yelled to my parents as the creatures surrounded us. "I think that's how they come through." I dove for Elliot's room while Mom and Jim created a distraction with every light in the house. The wooden box sat on his dresser, pulsing with a glowing energy. Inside was a carved doll that looked exactly like Elliot. Without thinking, I grabbed it and threw it into the fireplace, lighting a match with shaking hands. The doll burst into flames. The screams that followed weren't human. The house shook like an earthquake as the hollow ones dissolved back into shadow. But Elliot, or the thing wearing his face, stood in the doorway, his violet eyes burning with rage. "You haven't won," he hissed. "We'll be back. We always come back." Then he vanished, leaving us alone in our ruined home. We ran that night, changed our names, moved across the country, tried to build a new life. But you can't outrun shadows, and you can't forget violet eyes that follow you in your dreams. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers. I still see shapes moving in my peripheral vision. And I know that somewhere out there, Elliot is waiting. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your own mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media. Who knows, your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes alive, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.